Today, I want to tell you a story so powerful it proves one moment of courage can rewrite an entire life, set beneath the cold skies of the Old West. This is a land of endless snow, silent forests, and crossroads where fate waits patiently. It began with a door opening in the middle of a winter storm, a small human choice that awakened love, danger, and a future no one saw coming. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The rain in Boston came down like a sentence already passed, striking the cobblestones with cold resolve as Lenneth Ward stood at the tall window of her father's study. Her reflection hovered in the glass, pale and distant, like a stranger trapped behind it. Behind her, two men spoke of her future with the casual authority of traders discussing land or livestock. "The wedding will take place in 3 months," Mercer Ward declared, his voice sharp and final, like a judge's hammer. "That gives Dorothea enough time to prepare a proper trousseau. My daughter will understand what's expected of her." Across the room, Collard Varon Hale answered without hesitation, his tone weighted with command. "My son has firm standards. Garrick Hale does not tolerate disorder." Lenneth's fingers tightened in the fabric of her gray dress. She had met Garrick exactly twice. The first time, he had looked at her the way her father evaluated property, measuring, weighing, deciding what use she might serve. The second time, at a garden gathering, she had seen him strike a servant for spilling wine. When Lenneth gasped, Garrick turned to her and smiled. It was a thin smile, empty of warmth. "You'll learn soon enough," he had said calmly, "that discipline keeps the world in line, in all things." That night, Lenneth made her choice. The planning took weeks, quiet weeks, careful weeks. She sold off the small inheritance her mother, Elsbeth Ward, had left behind. Money her father never knew existed. With it, she bought traveling clothes, sturdy boots, and passage west under a borrowed name. Her mother's sister had once written from Santa Fe, years ago, a brief letter, an open door. At the time, Lenneth had ignored it. Now it became her lifeline. On a fog-choked morning, while Mercer Ward attended business at the bank and Dorothea Ward hosted tea with the Women's Auxiliary, Lenneth walked out of her childhood home carrying a single carpet bag. She left behind silk gowns, books, her piano, and the suffocating future chosen for her. The journey west felt endless. Train cars rattled through a world that shifted from green to gold, the land widening as mountains rose like ancient sentinels. With every mile, Lenneth felt the rigid corset of her former life loosen, though fear followed her like a shadow. What if her father discovered her disappearance too soon? What if Garrick came after her? What if Santa Fe held nothing for her at all? Santa Fe offered both mercy and loss. Her aunt was gone, past the winter before. The house already sold. Still, the lawyer who handled the estate remembered her name. "Your aunt spoke of you often, Miss Ward," Sylvan Marr said gently. "She worried you were trapped back east." "Is there somewhere I might go?" Lenneth asked, her voice tight. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere I could disappear." Sylvan Marr studied her face longer than necessary. Then he nodded. "There's land in the mountains, 30 miles north, a trapper's place, abandoned. No roads, no neighbors, hard country." He paused. "You'd need supplies. Winter comes early there." Lenneth didn't hesitate. "That's exactly what I need." For a price that offended her Boston sensibilities, but which Sylvan assured her was fair, she bought provisions, a mule, and directions to the isolated cabin. "The nearest settlement is 2 days' ride," he warned. "If trouble finds you up there, you'll be on your own." Lenneth met his gaze. "That's the point." The climb into the mountains stripped away what remained of the woman she had been. Dust and sweat stained her traveling dress. Her pinned hair came loose, tangled by wind and effort. Her hands blistered from leading the mule over stone and incline. And yet, with every step higher into the rugged Sangre de Cristo range, something unfamiliar took root in her chest. Hope. The cabin sat low in a narrow valley, built of logs and stone, guarded on 3 sides by rising slopes. Early snow dusted the peaks. A cold, clear creek ran nearby. Pines whispered overhead. Inside, the cabin held only 2 rooms divided by a stone hearth. The roof was sound, the door still solid. As the sun dipped low and painted the mountains in fire and shadow, Lenneth stood in the doorway and let the tears come. For the first time in her 23 years, she belonged to no one but herself. The weeks that followed tested her in ways Boston never had. The cabin needed work. Serious work. Gaps between logs had to be sealed. The fireplace cleared. The small barn reinforced to protect the mule from winter. She had never known physical labor. But necessity taught quickly. Her soft hands hardened. She learned to split wood, her first attempts clumsy, producing more splinters than logs. She learned to build fires, to cook over coals, to preserve what little food she had. The garden behind the cabin had gone wild. She cleared it by hand, uncovering stubborn potatoes and herbs that refused to die. And as the mountains closed around her, Lenneth Ward discovered she was stronger than anyone had ever allowed her to believe. Potatoes and the stubborn endurance of herbs that refused to surrender to neglect filled the small pantry. Yet the solitude Lenneth Ward had longed for did not always arrive gently. At times it pressed against her like a physical weight. Nights in the cabin carried a silence so deep it rang in her ears, broken only by wind threading through pine branches and the distant cries of coyotes echoing off the slopes. There were moments when Lenneth wondered if she had escaped one cage only to lock herself inside another. Boston's gilded confinement exchanged for a lonely cell of her own choosing. But dawn always answered those doubts. She would step outside into air sharp with pine and snowmelt, freedom hanging thick and undeniable, and she knew she had chosen correctly. October crept in with light snow that vanished by afternoon. Lenneth worked longer hours, aware that real winter waited just beyond the horizon. She stacked firewood against the cabin's north wall until it brushed the eaves. She gathered the last of the garden, squash, dried beans, herbs tied and hung from rafters. Sylvan Marr's warning echoed in her memory. Once the heavy snow arrived, she would be cut off until spring. "Are you certain about this?" he had asked. "A woman alone in those mountains. It isn't natural." Lenneth had met his concern with a steady smile. "Neither is forcing a woman into marriage with a cruel man. I'll trust the mountains." By mid-November, winter came without apology. Snow fell for 3 uninterrupted days, transforming the valley into a flawless white expanse. Beautiful and quietly threatening. Lenneth built routines to keep herself steady. Morning. Tend the fire. Prepare breakfast. Care for the mule. Afternoon. Repair the cabin, mend clothes, sort supplies, read from the few books she owned. Evening. Cook dinner. Sit by the hearth. And try not to think too deeply about what she had left behind. Still thoughts crept in. Mercer Ward's fury when he discovered her gone. Whether Garrick Hale cared enough to pursue her, or whether her escape had merely bruised his pride. Whether Dorothea Ward even noticed her absence, or quietly welcomed one less burden. Those thoughts circled like winter birds, but Lenneth pushed them away. She had made her choice. Whatever came next, she would meet it as herself. Not as an obedient daughter, not as a reluctant bride. The The storm began on a Tuesday evening in early December. Lenneth sensed it before it arrived. The air unnaturally still, clouds thickening over the peaks. She carried extra firewood inside, filled every pot and bucket from the creek, and prepared herself for days of confinement. Snow began softly, heavy flakes drifting like feathers. By nightfall, the wind rose to a roar, driving snow sideways. Lenneth banked the fire and retreated to her bed, layering every blanket she owned as the cabin shuddered with each gust. She must have slept, because the sound jolted her awake, knocking. Her heart slammed against her ribs. At first, she thought the wind had torn something loose. A shutter, perhaps. Then it came again. 3 deliberate strikes against the door. Lenneth sat frozen, barely breathing. No one knew she was here. No one should have been out in this storm. Her thoughts raced. Had her father found her? Had Garrick Hale followed her west? Were there outlaws in these mountains, men who hunted isolated travelers? The knocking came again, harder now. Then a voice, deep, urgent, speaking words she did not understand. Her hands trembled as she lit the lantern and wrapped a shawl over her nightdress. She had a rifle, Sylvan Marr had insisted, but it leaned awkwardly near the door, and she wasn't certain she could fire it. Still, she took it, gripping the stock clumsily as she approached. "Who's there?" she called, hating the fear in her voice. The voice answered again. Foreign words, then a strained attempt at English. "Help!" The wind screamed. Lenneth imagined someone freezing to death just beyond the door. But what if it was deception? Before she could decide, something heavy struck the wood. Not a knock, but a collapse. Conscience and terror warred inside her chest. Conscience won. Lenneth set the rifle down and lifted the thick wooden bar. She pulled the door open a crack, and the wind nearly ripped it from her grasp. A man fell forward into the cabin, dragging snow with him. He caught himself on his hands and knees, breathing hard. Lenneth staggered back, a scream lodged in her throat. He was Apache. She knew it instantly, though she had never seen one of the Ashwind kin before. Long black hair was tied back from his face. Buckskin clothing clung to him, soaked through and stiff with ice. Blood darkened the leather at his side, spreading with every breath. The man looked up, and Lenneth found herself locked in eyes as dark and unyielding as mountain stone. He spoke in his language first, then tried again in broken English. "Storm, lost, need shelter. Please." Lenneth's thoughts emptied, all at once. Every warning she had ever absorbed about the Apache crashed through her mind. Half-remembered traveler tales, sensational newspaper stories, the quiet prejudices spoken so casually even in Boston's polished drawing rooms. She should shut the door, slam the bar back in place, reach for the rifle. But the man did not advance. He stayed where he was, on his hands and knees, snow melting beneath him into dark puddles. Blood dripped steadily onto her clean wooden floor. In the lantern's glow, his face showed pain. Deep, unmistakable, but no threat. He was young, near her own age, and stripped of strength by exhaustion and injury. "Please," he said again. The word trembled as it left him. Lenneth made her choice. She pushed the door closed against the screaming wind, dropped the bar into place, and turned fully toward the stranger now trapped inside her cabin. "You're hurt," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Let me help you." He spoke softly in his own language, and though she did not understand the words, she sensed relief in his tone. With visible effort, he shifted, bracing himself until he could sit with his back against the door. Now she could see him clearly. Even seated, he was tall, broad through the shoulders, built with the strength of a man accustomed to rough land and harder survival. His skin caught the lantern light like polished copper. Blood continued to seep from his side. "I'm going to get water and cloth," Lenneth said carefully, speaking as if clarity might bridge the gap between them. "To clean the wound. Do you understand?" He nodded once, his dark eyes never leaving her face. In them, she saw the same weariness she felt in herself. He did not trust her any more than she trusted him, and somehow that understanding eased her pounding heart. Lenneth moved quickly. She fetched the basin, poured warm water from the pot near the hearth, gathered clean cloth. Her hands still trembled, but the work gave her focus. When she knelt beside him, he watched her closely but did not pull away. She gestured to his side. "May I?" After a pause, he nodded and carefully shifted his arm aside. The wound was deep but cleaner than she had feared. The blood had exaggerated its severity. Lenneth cleaned it gently, silently grateful that Elsbeth Ward had once insisted her daughter learn basic nursing. The man endured the pain without sound, though his jaw tightened. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "How did you get hurt?" He seemed to grasp her meaning, if not every word. "Slide," he said, moving his hand. "Rocks. Storm came fast." Lenneth nodded, picturing him high in these mountains as the blizzard descended. "You were lucky to find this cabin." Something close to a smile touched his mouth. "Lucky," he repeated, as if testing the word. She bound the wound with torn strips of cloth, working by instinct and memory. When she finished, she leaned back, suddenly aware of the strangeness of it all. A wounded stranger, a storm outside, and herself kneeling in her nightgown as if this were ordinary. "I'm Lenneth," she said, touching her chest. "Lenneth Ward." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he mirrored the gesture. "Cayenne," he said. "I am called Cayenne." "Cayenne," she repeated. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, at hearing his name spoken clearly. Outside, the wind battered the shutters. Cayenne glanced toward the sound, then back to her. "Can't go," he said. She understood. "No," she replied softly. "You'll have to stay here." For a heartbeat, they only looked at one another. Two people from different worlds, bound together by storm and chance. Lenneth thought of the fear she should be feeling. Instead, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. Something had changed tonight. What it meant, she could not yet know. "Are you hungry?" she asked, standing and offering her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Cayenne accepted it. He rose slowly, favoring his injured side. She guided him to the chair near the fire and turned to the hearth, warming the remaining stew from her supper. She felt his gaze on her as she worked, knew he was re-examining his assumptions just as she was questioning her own. When she handed him the bowl, their fingers brushed briefly. He murmured something in his language. Gratitude, she guessed, and ate carefully. Lenneth served herself and sat across from him on the bench. The fire crackled between them while the storm raged beyond the walls. In this small cabin, far from everything she had known, an impossible moment unfolded. She thought of Boston, of Mercer Ward, of Garrick Hale, of the life she had fled. She thought of every story she had been told about the Apache, and looked at the wounded man eating stew in her cabin, who had said please and thank you, who had asked for shelter rather than taken it. Perhaps, Lenneth thought, the most dangerous thing in the world was not the unknown, but the assumptions carried into it. "The storm will last at least a day," she said, more to break the silence than from any certainty he understood. "Maybe two." Outside, the wind answered for him. "You'll need rest for that wound to mend," Leneth Ward said quietly. Cohen looked at her over the rim of his bowl, and once more she caught that faint, fleeting trace of a smile. Rest, he agreed. Then go home. Home. The word lingered between them, weighted with meanings neither could fully shape. Leneth wondered where his home lay, whether people waited for him beyond these mountains, whether they feared for him in this storm. And she wondered, in the same breath, if he questioned who waited for her. Yes, she said softly. Then you can go home. Even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were untrue. Whatever had begun inside this storm-bound cabin would not simply dissolve when the snow stopped falling. She felt it as clearly as the fire's warmth against her skin. Cayenne finished his stew and set the bowl aside. Fatigue pulled at him now, pain and exhaustion finally claiming their due. Leneth fetched additional blankets and gestured to the space nearest the hearth. You should sleep there, she said. It's the warmest spot. He understood, and inclined his head in thanks. As he settled carefully onto the blankets, Leneth retreated to her own bed in the adjoining room. Sleep came slowly. She lay awake, listening to the storm and to the steady sound of another person breathing beneath her roof. She had fled Boston to escape a future shaped by other hands. She had come to these mountains seeking isolation and safety. Instead, on this wild winter night, she had opened her door to a wounded stranger who, by all the rules she had been taught, should have terrified her. Yet she was not afraid. Cautious, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But something deeper than logic told her that Cayenne, whoever he truly was, meant her no harm. Tomorrow would bring questions and consequences. For tonight, the storm raged on, and two strangers sheltered together against the dark, beginning something neither could have foreseen. Leneth woke to silence. The wind had vanished, leaving a stillness so complete it rang in her ears. Pale light seeped through the shutter cracks, the bright reflected glow of fresh snow beneath the sun. She dressed quickly, aware of Cayenne's presence in the other room. When she emerged, she found him already awake, sitting upright against the wall, blankets folded neatly at his side. He watched her approach with the same guarded weariness she had seen the night before. "Good morning," Leneth said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet. "How is your wound?" Cayenne touched his side carefully. "Better. Thank you." His English, though still limited, came more easily now. Perhaps fear had clouded them both the night before. Leneth stirred the embers back to life and added wood. "Are you hungry? I can make breakfast." "I should go," Cayenne said. There was resolve in his voice and reluctance. "Your kindness, I do not forget." Leneth crossed to the window and pushed open the shutters. Snow filled the valley, an unbroken white reaching halfway up the cabin walls. "I don't think you're going anywhere today," she said. "Look." Cayenne rose carefully and joined her. He muttered something in his own language. Perhaps a curse, perhaps simple acceptance. "Much snow," he said. "It will take days to melt enough for travel," Leneth replied. "And your wound needs more time. You'll tear it open trying to climb through that." She saw the conflict plainly, pride set against necessity. At last, necessity won. "I will help," he said firmly. "I do not take without giving." "You're injured," Leneth protested. He shook his head. "Small wound. I have had worse." He gestured around the cabin. "You have work. I have hands." There was dignity in his tone, unyielding and calm. Leneth sighed. "All right, but carefully. If you reopen that wound, I'll be very cross with you." That almost smile appeared again. "Cross?" he asked. "Angry," she explained, and found herself smiling in return. As the days passed, A rhythm formed between them. Lenneth had been right. The snow was deep and stubborn, refusing to melt. They were trapped together. Two strangers learning the strange closeness of shared survival. Mornings were for work. Cohen kept his word. Despite his injury, he insisted on hauling firewood and drawing water from the creek, though the effort clearly cost him. He checked the mule daily in the small barn, ensuring it was fed and sheltered. Lenneth cooked and tended his wound, changing the bandages twice each day. He bore the discomfort without complaint, accepting her care with quiet gratitude. His endurance stood in sharp contrast to the men she had known in Boston, who treated minor discomfort as tragedy. Communication came slowly, through gestures, repeated words, patience. Cohen's English improved with each passing day, and Lenneth learned fragments of his language in return. She learned that he belonged to the Ashwind kin, a people who moved between the mountains of New Mexico and Arizona, along paths walked by their ancestors for generations. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Lenneth asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "You are a leader, aren't you?" She had noticed it from the start. The quiet authority in the way he carried himself, even here, even wounded. Cohen weighed the word for a long moment. "Leader," he said at last. "Small band. My father was chief before me. Now I lead." "That's a heavy burden," Lenneth Ward said quietly. He studied her, and she saw recognition in his eyes. "You understand this? Responsibility." "Yes," Lenneth replied, thinking of everything she had left behind. "I understand running from responsibilities that would crush you." Cohen was silent for a time. Then he asked, "You run also, from what?" Slowly, carefully, Lenneth told him about Boston, about Mercer Ward's expectations, about Garrick Hale, about a marriage arranged not for love but for advantage, one she could not accept. She did not tell him everything. Some memories were too raw, too humiliating to voice, but she told him enough. "This man," Kane said when she finished, his voice hardening. "He hurt you?" "Not with his hands," Lenneth answered, "but I saw him hurt others. I saw his cruelty, his arrogance." She lowered her gaze. "My father didn't care. The marriage was business, military contracts, influence. I was only the coin used to buy it." Coyne's jaw tightened. "Among my people, marriage is different. The woman chooses. Family may advise, but force—" He shook his head. "That is not honorable." "Your people sound wiser than mine," Lenneth said with a bitter laugh. "All people have wisdom," Kane replied. "All people have foolishness." He gestured gently between them. "You judged me by stories, yes? Before I came here?" Heat rose to Lenneth's cheeks. "Yes," she admitted. "I had heard terrible things about the Apache." "And I have heard terrible things about white people," Kane said calmly. "Many untrue, many true." His eyes held hers. "But you are not all white people. I am not all Apache. We are Lenneth. We are Cayenne." The simplicity of it struck her like a blow. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm sorry for my prejudice." "You open your door in a storm," Kane said. "You help a wounded stranger. This takes courage." He touched his chest. "I see your heart. It is good." Something shifted between them then, a wall giving way, a bridge forming. They were no longer merely strangers bound by weather and chance. They were two people choosing to truly see one another. As the weeks passed, Lenneth found herself increasingly drawn to Kane's knowledge. He taught her how to read the sky and wind, how to sense weather before it arrived. He showed her better ways to preserve meat, how to set simple snares for rabbits, apologizing that he could not hunt properly while injured. "When I am healed," he promised, "I will bring you meat before I go." You will have food for winter." "You don't have to," Lenneth protested. "I want to," Cayenne said simply. "You saved my life. This is a small return." In exchange, Lenneth helped him with English. Words came easier now, and soon they talked for long hours about their different worlds. She told him about books and music, about cities so large their buildings touched the sky. He spoke of sacred mountains, of traditions carried through generations, of a way of life increasingly under threat. "The soldiers push us," Cayenne said one evening, his voice heavy. "They say we must stay in one place, must farm like white men, must abandon who we are. But how do you abandon yourself?" "I don't know," Lenneth answered honestly. "It isn't fair." "Fairness is like snow," Cayenne said thoughtfully. "Beautiful idea, but it melts fast in the sun." Lenneth laughed despite herself. "That's very poetic." "Poetic?" he asked. "It means words that are beautiful, words that touch the heart." Cayenne smiled, fully this time, and it transformed his face. "Then yes," he said, "I am very poetic." Their laughter filled the cabin, and Lenneth realized she could not remember the last time she had laughed so freely. In Boston, laughter had always been careful, measured, watched. Here, with Cayenne, she was simply herself. The snow finally began to retreat during the second week. Cayenne's wound healed cleanly, and Lenneth felt a quiet pride in her care. But they both knew what the melting meant. His departure was drawing near. Lenneth found herself dreading it, though she tried not to ask why. "Will you be safe here alone?" Cayenne asked one morning as sunlight turned the snow into scattered diamonds. "I've been alone for months," Lenneth replied. "I'll manage." "Before, you did not know what you did not know," Cayenne said seriously. "Now you understand the dangers. That sometimes makes them more frightening." Lenneth had no answer for that. Lenneth Ward understood what Cayenne meant. Her ignorance had once sheltered her, like a thin blanket against the cold. Now, after learning from him about the dangers hidden in these mountains, she would face them with open eyes, and perhaps with more fear. "I'll be careful," she promised. "If you need help," Cayenne said slowly, choosing each word with care. "My winter camp is 1 day west. Follow the creek until it splits. Take the northern branch. When you see red stone, you are close. We will stay there until spring." Lenneth's chest tightened. "You're giving me directions to your camp? Why?" Cayenne met her gaze without hesitation. "Because you may need help." He paused, struggling briefly with the language. "And because you matter now. Your safety matters." "You matter to me too," Lenneth whispered. Something passed between them then, an unspoken recognition that reached beyond gratitude or necessity. They stood on the edge of something neither dared to name, both sensing that naming it might make it too real, too fragile. That afternoon, Cayenne set about repairing the cabin. Despite Lenneth's protests that his injury was still healing, he insisted. He secured loose shingles, reinforced the barn door, and split enough firewood to last another month. "You're impossible," Lenneth told him, hands on her hips. "I learned from you," Cayenne replied, a teasing warmth in his voice that made her heart stumble. On his final evening, Lenneth prepared the best meal she could from her meager stores. They ate slowly, each aware that dawn would bring separation. Afterward, they sat by the fire as they had every night, but this time the silence pressed heavier, broken only by halting words. "Will you return to your family?" Cayenne asked at last. "To Boston?" "Never," Lenneth said firmly. "I won't go back to that life. But living here alone, this is also hard." "A hard life I choose is better than an easy one where I'm trapped," she answered. Then, more softly, "And you've made it less hard. I didn't know how lonely I was until these past weeks." "I will return," Cayenne said after a moment. "In spring, when the snow retreats, I will see that you are well." "You don't have to." "I want to," he said, cutting her off gently. "If you want to come," Lenneth replied, the words barely more than breath, "I would like that very much." Their eyes met across the firelight, heavy with everything left unsaid. Lenneth wanted to ask him to stay, to speak the feelings tightening in her chest. But fear held her still. Fear of rejection. Fear of hoping for something that could never exist. Cayenne rose slowly. For a heartbeat, Lenneth thought he might cross the distance between them. Instead, he said quietly, "I should rest. Long walk tomorrow." "Yes," she agreed, disappointment washing through her. "Good night, Cayenne." "Good night, Lenneth." She lay awake for hours, listening to his breathing in the next room, wondering if he too lay sleepless, burdened by thoughts he could not voice. Morning came too soon. Lenneth prepared breakfast while Cayenne gathered his few belongings. The snow had softened enough for travel, though it remained treacherous. He would need to move carefully to protect his healing wound. They stood in the doorway as sunlight crept over the eastern peaks. Cayenne looked down at her, and Lenneth saw her own turmoil reflected in his dark eyes. "Thank you," he said, "for saving my life, for your kindness, for seeing me as I am, not as you were taught to see me." "Thank you," Lenneth replied, her throat tight, "for showing me that strength and gentleness can live in the same man, for teaching me so much. For what?" Cayenne asked softly. "For making me hope again," she whispered. "I didn't know I'd stopped hoping until you reminded me how." Cayenne lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. The contact was brief, almost restrained, yet warmth surged through Lenneth from head to toe. "Be safe, Lenneth Ward," he said. "Keep your rifle close. Check your snares every day." "I know," she interrupted with a trembling smile. "Follow the creek north. Red rocks, I remember." "Good." He stepped back. "Spring comes early in these mountains. I will return then." "I'll be here," Lenneth promised. She watched him walk away, his tall figure moving carefully through the thinning snow. At the edge of the clearing, he turned and lifted his hand in farewell. Lenneth waved back until he vanished among the trees. The cabin felt unbearably empty. She remained in the doorway long after he was gone, staring at the place where he had disappeared. Reason whispered warnings. He was Ashwind kin. She was white. Their worlds did not align. She was foolish to feel anything beyond gratitude. Yet her heart refused to listen. Yet her heart, long silent, had begun to speak again. And what it whispered, again and again, was that she wanted to open herself once more. That the weeks stretching toward spring felt unbearable. That something lasting had taken root in this cabin during the storm. Something that could not be undone. Lenneth Ward closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to fall. She had fled Boston to escape a life chosen by others. She had not expected that in her solitude she might stumble upon something honest and real. But life, it seemed, had its own designs. Outside, the snow continued its slow retreat, and Lenneth tried to picture what spring might bring. Winter deepened after Cayenne's departure. Lenneth threw herself into survival with renewed resolve, using everything he had taught her. She checked her snares each morning and more often than not found rabbits waiting. She rationed her stores carefully, supplementing them with dried herbs and preserved food prepared the previous autumn. But the evenings were harder now. She had grown used to conversation, to the warmth of another presence. Silence, once her refuge, now pressed heavily around her. She found herself speaking aloud to the mule, recounting her day as if it might answer. "I'm losing my mind," she told the animal one night, "turning into that strange mountain woman who scares children in stories." The mule, unimpressed, continued chewing hay. January brought deeper snow and punishing cold. There were days when Lenneth questioned every decision that had brought her here. What if she fell ill? What if the cabin burned? What if something happened to the mule? The questions circled like wolves, and she fought to keep them from closing in. Then February arrived, and with it, an unexpected visitor. Lenneth heard the horse before she saw it. She was drawing water from the creek when the sound of hooves froze her in place. Cayenne had said his camp lay a day west. Who else would be riding these mountains in winter? She ran for the cabin, seized her rifle, and took position by the window. Moments later, a rider emerged from the trees, not Cayenne, but an older Apache man, streaks of gray woven through his long hair. He halted his horse at a respectful distance and called out in heavily accented English, "Message, I bring message." Lenneth's pulse thundered. She opened the door a narrow crack. "From whom?" "From Cayenne." The rider reached into a pouch and withdrew a small leather bundle. "He sends this. Says, tell you, be strong. Spring comes soon." He tossed the bundle towards the doorway. It landed softly in the snow, carefully wrapped against damp. Before Lenneth could speak or thank him, the rider had already turned and disappeared into the trees. With trembling hands, she retrieved the bundle. Inside the leather wrap lay expertly prepared dried meat. At the center, wrapped in cloth, was a small wooden carving, a bird frozen mid-flight. She turned it slowly in her hands, marveling at the care behind it. Someone, she knew who, had spent hours shaping the wood until it felt smooth as silk. The wings spread wide, free and effortless. That night, Lenneth placed the carving on the shelf above her bed, where she could see it before sleep. The message was unmistakable. She had not been forgotten. Cayenne had sent food, and a promise. The gift carried her through the final, unforgiving months of winter. When storms battered the cabin and the walls seemed to close in, she held the carved bird and remembered his quiet strength, his almost smile, the look in his eyes that morning she still dared not name. March arrived with the first true signs of thaw. Snow withdrew from the southern slopes, revealing brown grass and dark earth. The creek swelled with meltwater. Aspen buds appeared. Birds returned, filling mornings with song. Lenneth prepared for spring with rising anticipation. She scrubbed the cabin clean, aired her blankets, and turned the soil of her small garden plot. She told herself it was simply seasonal work. She knew better. She was preparing for someone. The afternoon Cayenne returned, Lenneth was working the garden, shovel biting into the earth. She heard footsteps and looked up to see him standing at the edge of the clearing, watching her. The sight stole her breath. He looked different. Or perhaps her memory had softened him. He wore fresh buckskin, detailed with beadwork. His hair was clean and loose over his shoulders. Supplies were strapped across his back, and he moved without the slightest hint of his former injury. "Lenneth," he said. The way he spoke her name, as though it held weight, made her heart stumble. "You came back," she said uselessly. "I said I would." He stepped closer, his gaze moving from the cabin to the garden, then to her. "You are well? Winter did not break you?" "I survived," Lenneth said, setting aside her shovel. "Your friend brought supplies in February, and the carving." Cayenne's expression softened, just slightly. "Thank you," Lenneth said softly. "It was beautiful." "You liked it?" Cayenne asked. There was hesitation in his voice that caught her off guard. I loved it, Lenneth answered without hesitation. It's on the shelf by my bed. I look at it every night. Something eased in Cayenne's expression, relief, and something deeper. Good, he said quietly. I hoped. I did not know if something so small would matter. It mattered more than you know, Lenneth whispered. They stood facing each other, the weight of 4 long months settling between them. Months of silence, of winter nights filled with doubt, of wondering whether what they had shared was real or only a fragile moment shaped by storm and isolation. I brought fresh meat, Cayenne said at last, breaking the stillness. I promised I would hunt for you, if you still want that. Yes, Lenneth said immediately. Stay, please, even if only a few days. I will stay as long as you wish, Cayenne replied. That first evening felt both familiar and entirely new. They slipped back into old rhythms, Lenneth at the stove, Cayenne tending the animals, moving around one another with an ease that surprised them both. But something had changed. The awareness between them had sharpened, no longer born of necessity but of choice. This time they were not bound by storm or injury. They were here because they wanted to be. Over supper, they spoke of the months apart. Cayenne told her of the Ashwind Kin's winter camp, of thinning game and the growing pressure from the High Plains posse encroaching on traditional hunting paths. Lenneth told him of the hardest nights, of doubt, and how his gift had carried her through. I have something for you as well, Lenneth said after they ate. She crossed to her trunk and retrieved a carefully wrapped bundle. I made it during the winter. I had to guess the size. Cayenne unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a shirt sewn from soft cotton she had brought from Santa Fe. The collar and cuffs were embroidered with a pattern she had pieced together from memory and imagination. He ran his fingers over the stitching, reverent. You made this, he said softly. For me? I know it isn't as practical as buckskin, Lenneth said, suddenly unsure. But maybe for warmer weather. I just wanted to give you something. Cayenne looked at her with an intensity that left her exposed. Among my people, he said carefully, when someone makes clothing with their own hands, it is not a small gift. It means, I think of you. I care for your comfort. I honor you. Oh, Lenneth breathed. I didn't know. I just wanted you to have something to remember me by. I do not need a thing to remember, Cayenne said gently. All winter I remembered. I wondered if you were warm, if you were safe, if you thought of me. Every day, Lenneth whispered. I thought of you every day. The air between them thickened, charged with everything left unsaid. Cayenne set the shirt aside with care and stood, stepping closer until he stood before her. I must tell you something, he said, and if after I speak you want me to leave, I will. I will not return if that is your wish. Fear tightened Lenneth's chest. Tell me. Cayenne drew a slow breath. Among my people, when a man wishes to court a woman, he brings gifts to her family. He shows he can provide, that he will honor her. He paused. But you have no family here, no one to speak for you, to guard your interests. So I must speak to you directly and hope I do not offend. Her heart pounded. Go on. I want to court you, Lenneth Ward, Cayenne said steadily, though his eyes betrayed his vulnerability. I want to bring you meat, to share your work, to sit by your fire and hear your voice. I want to know that when winter comes again, you will not be alone, unless you choose to be. He hesitated, gathering himself. I know the world would call this impossible. I know there are many reasons. Yes, Lenneth said, stepping forward. He stopped. Yes? Yes, she said firmly. I want you to court me. She met his gaze. I tried not to hope for this. I told myself it was only gratitude or loneliness, but it wasn't. When you left, something went dark. When you came back today, it lit again. She swallowed. I don't care what the world says. I care about what we say to each other. Cohen's face transformed, joy breaking through with such clarity it brought tears to Lenneth's eyes. Slowly, deliberately, Cayenne reached for her hands, leaving her every chance to step away. His palms were warm and calloused, his grip firm yet careful, as though he understood the weight of what he was holding. I will court you with respect, he said. I will not hurry you. I will not assume anything. He searched her face. You must always tell me what you want, and what you do not want. Your choice matters above all. My choice, Lenneth repeated softly, as if tasting the words. Yes, my choice. She lifted her chin. And I choose this. I choose you. Standing together in the firelight, their hands joined between them, Lenneth felt a certainty she had never known before. This was not impulse. It was not fear or loneliness. It was right. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt like the opening chapter of something precious. Cayenne hunted each morning, returning with deer and rabbits, patiently teaching Lenneth how to dress and preserve the meat. They worked shoulder to shoulder on the cabin and garden, and she was struck by how much lighter every task felt with another person beside her. Yet it was the quiet moments that revealed the depth of what was forming. The brief touch at her shoulder when he passed behind her, the way she lingered near him while he worked, the conversations that stretched late into the night because neither wanted the day to end. One evening, Cayenne spoke of his duty. My people need me, he said. I cannot stay here always, though I wish I could. There will be times I must return to them for weeks. I understand, Lenneth replied. I would never ask you to abandon who you are. She hesitated, then continued, her voice softer. That would change you, and I love who... She stopped, the words suspended between them. Cayenne's gaze darkened in the firelight. Say it again, he said quietly. I love who you are, Lenneth whispered. I think I might love you. No, might, Cayenne said, stepping closer until only inches remained between them. I love you, Lenneth. Not maybe. Not someday. His voice steadied. I love your courage, your kindness, your strength, the way you see me, not as a threat or a story, but as a man. He lifted his hands to her face, his touch reverent. May I kiss you? I do not know all the rules of your world, or mine, but I want to kiss you more than I want my next breath. Yes, Lenneth breathed. Please. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, filled with restraint and deep respect. Lenneth's hands rested on his shoulders as the world seemed to shift and settle around them. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. I dreamed of this, Cayenne admitted, resting his forehead against hers. All winter, after I left, I dreamed of you too, Lenneth said softly. Every night. They held each other, and Lenneth felt something settle deep within her, an unshakable sense of belonging. Not to a city or a past life, but here. With a man who asked permission, honored her will, and made her feel both safe and free. Over the next week, their bond deepened in countless quiet ways. Cayenne taught her more words from his language, and Lenneth discovered an unexpected gift for learning them. She taught him to read simple English, delighting in the care he took with each word. They spoke of the future cautiously, acknowledging its weight without letting it overshadow the present. His people faced growing pressure from the government. Lenneth knew she would one day have to decide whether she could truly leave her old life behind. These problems are real, Cayenne said one afternoon as they sat beside the creek. But they belong to tomorrow. Today, he added, we are here, together. That is enough, Lenneth said, then hesitated. Is it enough for you? I cannot join your people as a proper wife. Some would never accept me. Some would welcome you, Cayenne replied. Others would fear you. That is truth. He met her gaze. But we do not need their permission to love each other, only our own hearts. And when winter comes again, Lenneth asked, will you stay with me? Cayenne was silent for a moment. I must spend time with my people. They need their leader. Then he reached for her hands again. But I will not let you face another winter alone. We will find a path forward, Cayenne said quietly, closing his fingers around hers. If you wished it, you could come to winter camp as my wife. Lenneth's breath caught. You would marry me after everything? Because of everything, Cayenne corrected gently. In my way, there would be a ceremony. In yours as well, I think. His gaze never left hers. Or we could shape something new, something that belongs only to us. Then he shook his head once. But I do not speak of marriage yet. First, we court. You must be certain. This life, he continued, standing between two worlds, it will be difficult. Nothing worth choosing is ever easy, Lenneth replied. You taught me that? As the days passed, Lenneth felt herself changing once more. She had fled Boston frightened and uncertain. She had endured winter alone and learned resilience. Now, with Cayenne, she was discovering partnership. Not possession, not control, but shared strength and mutual respect. They planned carefully, without illusion. Cayenne would return to the Ashwind kin to fulfill his duties, then come back in 3 weeks. Summer would be theirs to build toward a decision. Autumn would be faced together. I will tell my people about you, Cayenne said. Some will be angry, but they must know my heart. I'll write to my aunt's lawyer, Lenneth decided. Sylvan Marr may know how to establish my legal standing without alerting my father. I need to protect myself. Protect us. Neither pretended the road ahead would be kind. The world did not welcome bonds that crossed boundaries like theirs, yet what they shared was rare. Love grounded in trust, choice, and the courage to be fully seen. On Cayenne's final night before leaving, they sat on the cabin's narrow porch as stars pricked the darkening sky. Lenneth leaned into him, his arm warm and steady around her shoulders, peace settling over her like a mantle. 3 weeks, Cayenne said softly. I'll count every day, Lenneth answered. Be careful. Keep your rifle close, he replied. Check your snares. I know, she laughed. You've told me 100 times. Then I will tell you 100 more. His tone shifted, serious now. You are precious to me, Lenneth, more than anything. Nothing will happen, she promised. I'm not the girl who opened the door in the storm anymore. You were always strong, Cayenne said. You simply hadn't learned it yet. They kissed beneath the stars, and Lenneth etched every detail into memory. The warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. 3 weeks would pass. She would endure them. He would return. Morning came, and Cayenne prepared to leave. Lenneth did not cry. She smiled, grounded in his promise. As he rode away, turning once at the edge of the clearing, his raised hand spoke not of farewell, but of soon. The cabin felt empty after he left, but it was not the hollow solitude of before. This absence carried expectation. Lenneth threw herself into preparation, expanding the garden, reinforcing the barn, organizing supplies. She thought of the future with equal parts hope and caution. There were dangers ahead, risks that could turn deadly. But she had learned this much. Living safely had nearly destroyed her spirit. Choosing her own path, risking love, opening herself to possibility, was what made life worth living. 17 days after Cayenne's departure, hoofbeats shattered the quiet. Lenneth reached for her rifle and moved to the window, expecting Cayenne early. Instead, 3 white men rode into the clearing. Her blood turned cold. Even at a distance, she recognized one immediately. Garrick Hale, older now, his face sharpened by anger. 2 men rode with him, their posture and weapons marking them as hired guns. They had found her. The cabin had 1 door. She could barricade herself inside, but that would only buy time. Garrick Hale and his men could surround the place, or burn it. They dismounted. Garrick surveyed the clearing with open contempt, then called out, "Lenneth Ward, I know you're in there. Your father sent me to bring you home." Her fingers tightened around the rifle. She opened the door just enough to be heard. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Garrick. Leave." "You're not welcome here," Lenneth said. Garrick Hale laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. "Not welcome? My dear, you've been missing for nearly a year. Your father is frantic with worry." He gestured at the cabin with open contempt. "Did you truly believe you could hide in this shack forever?" "This is my home," Lenneth replied, her voice steady despite the fear pounding in her chest. "I left Boston by choice. I'm not returning." "You don't get to decide that," Garrick snapped. "You're promised to me. That makes you my responsibility." His eyes narrowed. "I've tracked you for months. Did you think I'd let you humiliate me by running? That I'd simply accept it?" One of the men with him stepped forward. Lenneth raised her rifle, leveling it through the narrow opening in the door. "Stop right there. I know how to use this, and I will." The man froze, glancing back at Garrick. Garrick lifted a hand to halt him, but his expression darkened. "Let's be sensible," Garrick said. "You can't live out here alone. It isn't safe for a woman. Come back to Boston. We'll marry quietly. This whole unfortunate episode can be forgotten." "I said no," Lenneth replied. "This is my land. I have every right to be here." "You're wrong," Garrick countered sharply. "Until marriage, your father remains your guardian. The law is on my side." His smile was thin. "I could have these men take you by force. I'd prefer not to, but don't mistake preference for restraint." Lenneth's thoughts raced. She could hold them off briefly, but not forever. 3 armed men would eventually overpower her. Her mind flew to Cayenne. 17 days. He had said 3 weeks. He couldn't know she was in danger. The directions he'd given her, to the winter camp, echoed in her thoughts. But escape with them watching the cabin? "I need time," Lenneth called out. "Give me until morning to consider." Garrick exchanged looks with his companions. "Very well," he said at last. "We'll camp here." His gaze hardened. "But if you try to run, we will hunt you down, and I won't be patient twice." Lenneth closed the door and slid the bolt home, her heart pounding. Through the window she watched them build a fire and settle in. One man kept his eyes on the cabin at all times. As darkness fell, Lenneth weighed her choices. Surrender meant Boston, and a life she had escaped. Fighting meant certain defeat. The third choice terrified her most. She took the carved bird Cayenne had made from its place and held it tightly. She had not endured winter alone, only to surrender now. She had not found freedom, or love, only to abandon it. She would run. Working silently, she packed what she could carry. Food, water skin, flint, knife. She dressed in her warmest, darkest clothing and wrapped herself in a dark blanket to break her outline in the trees. Before moonrise, she lifted the loose floorboard beneath her bed, one she had prepared months earlier as a precaution. The crawl space beneath the cabin was narrow and stank of damp earth. Lenneth lowered herself carefully, pulling her pack after her and easing the board back into place above. She moved inch by inch beneath the floor, every scrape of fabric sounding thunderous in her ears. At the far side of the cabin, she paused. Voices drifted from the fire. The mule shifted in the barn. Unavoidable. She slipped out and pressed herself low, then moved for the tree line, step by careful step. Her heart thundered, but no shout came. No gunshot followed. Luck, or something greater, was with her. The forest swallowed her whole. Lenneth ran. Roots snagged her boots. Branches tore at her clothes and skin. The night was alive with sound and shadow, each one threatening discovery. But she ran anyway. Toward danger. Toward hope. Toward the man who had promised she would never face winter alone again. She had no lantern, no torch, only starlight breaking through the branches overhead. But the forest was no longer a stranger to her. Lenneth knew the land now, knew the pull of the creek that would guide her toward Cayenne's camp. Behind her, voices eventually rose. Shouts carried by the night air. Garrick Hale and his men had discovered her escape. Lenneth forced her legs to move faster, ignoring the fire in her lungs and the ache spreading through her muscles. She had to reach the creek before they picked up her trail. The hours that followed dissolved into terror and instinct. Running, hiding, whispering prayers she did not remember learning. More than once she heard riders close by and pressed herself into brush or behind stone, barely breathing as hoofbeats passed within yards. Garrick did not give up. Morning found her miles from the cabin, following the creek as it cut through harsher ground. Her clothing was torn. Her hands and face were scratched raw by thorns and branches. Fatigue dragged at her like a weight. But she kept moving. Cayenne's words echoed in her mind. Where the creek divides, take the northern branch to the red stone. The sun climbed. Her pace slowed to a stagger. She carried food but dared not stop long enough to eat. At intervals she heard pursuit again. Distant calls, the faint rhythm of hooves. By mid-afternoon she reached the split in the waterway. Relief surged through her chest. She had chosen correctly. She turned north, climbing into steeper, rock-strewn ground. Each step became harder than the last. Her vision swam. Her legs betrayed her again and again. Then, hoof beats, fast, closing. She tried to run. Her body refused. She fell hard, a sharp cry torn from her as her ankle twisted beneath her. Pain flared white-hot. When she looked back, she saw Garrick and one of his men riding straight toward her. Lenneth struggled upright, but her ankle collapsed under her weight. Fear and despair crashed over her together. She had come too far to end like this. Garrick dismounted, his face red with fury. "You selfish, foolish girl," he snarled as he advanced. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The embarrassment? The expense?" "Stay back," Lenneth warned, though she had no weapon and could barely stand. "You don't get to decide," Garrick snapped. "You signed an agreement. Your father consented. You belong—" "She does not belong to you." The voice came from above. Lenneth looked up. Cayenne stood on a rocky rise, framed by sky and stone. He was not alone. 5 warriors of the pale Iron Riders flanked him, weapons ready, eyes hard. Garrick froze, his hand hovering inches from Lenneth's arm. "This does not concern you," Garrick said, though his confidence had thinned. "This is a private matter between myself and my fiancée." "She is not your fiancée," Cayenne replied, his English sharp and unyielding. He descended the rocks with smooth, deliberate steps. "She is free. She chose her path. You do not own her." "The law," Garrick began. "Your law holds no power here," Cayenne cut in. "This is our land. It was ours long before your people arrived. You are trespassing." Cayenne placed himself squarely between Garrick and Lenneth, his stance unmistakably protective. "You will leave." Garrick's companion rested a hand on his pistol, then hesitated. 2 men against 6 warriors, deep in Apache territory. The calculation was obvious. "This is abduction," Garrick tried. "The army will hear of it." "Tell them," Cayenne said calmly. "Tell them you crossed Apache land to take a woman by force. Tell them she fled because she would rather face death than marry you." A cold smile touched his mouth. "I think they will have questions." Lenneth saw the moment Garrick understood. Rage twisted his features, but he was not foolish enough to fight a battle he could not win. "You will regret this," he spat at Lenneth. "Both of you. Your father will not stop searching." "Let him search," Cayenne replied. "Lenneth Ward has broken no law. She is an adult. She may live where she chooses." He paused. "And I suspect your father would not wish it widely known that his daughter chose the mountains over the son he selected. Bad for business?" Garrick said nothing more. He mounted his horse. His companion followed. Without another word, they turned back the way they had come, retreating into the land they no longer controlled. Cayenne turned to Lenneth, kneeling beside her. His hands were gentle, his eyes fierce with concern. "You are safe now," he said. And for the first time since she had fled into the dark, Lenneth believed it. As they turned away, Garrick Hale cast one last look over his shoulder. The hatred in his eyes was so sharp that Lenneth Ward instinctively drew closer to Cayenne. "You've made your decision," Garrick said flatly. "Now live with what follows." Then he was gone. He and his man spurred their horses hard, retreating the way they had come. Lenneth waited until the thunder of hooves faded into the distance. Only then did her strength finally fail her. Her knees buckled. Cayenne caught her before she struck the ground, easing her down onto a flat stone nearby. "Lenneth," he whispered. Fear and relief tangled in the sound of her name. "When the scout reported white men at your cabin, when we saw you running, I thought I was too late." "How did you know?" Lenneth asked, her voice trembling with shock and release. "You weren't supposed to return for another week." "I could not stay away," Cayenne admitted quietly. "I told myself I was only checking on you. But the truth is, I wanted to be near you." He drew her close. "You are safe now. That is all that matters." Lenneth clung to him as the weight of terror and exhaustion finally broke free. She sobbed against his chest while Cayenne held her, murmuring comfort in his own tongue. The Pale Iron Riders remained at a respectful distance, watchful and ready, ensuring Garrick did not return. When her tears slowed, Cayenne examined her ankle. It was badly swollen, but intact. "You cannot walk," he said. "We will take you to our camp. You will ride with me." One of the warriors brought his horse. Cayenne lifted Lenneth carefully onto its back, then mounted behind her. She leaned into his warmth, feeling truly safe for the first time since Garrick had appeared at her cabin. The journey took hours. Lenneth drifted in and out of awareness, catching fleeting glimpses of red stone ravines, narrow passes, and hidden valleys. At last, they reached a cluster of wickiups tucked among the rocks. Women and children emerged, staring in silence at the sight of their leader returning with a white woman. Lenneth sensed the whispers and uneasy looks, but Cayenne paid them no mind. He carried her into one of the larger shelters and laid her gently on thick furs. An elderly woman entered, speaking rapidly to Cayenne. He replied with calm respect. Though Lenneth could not understand the words, she heard affection in his tone. "My mother, Nail," Cayenne explained. "She will care for you. She is the finest healer among the Ashwind kin." Nail examined Lenneth's ankle with practiced hands. Lenneth murmured her thanks. Nael nodded, her expression reserved but not unkind. Over the following days, Lenneth healed under Nael's care. Her ankle was bound and elevated. She drank bitter herbal teas that eased the swelling and pain. Nael spoke little, yet tended her faithfully, changing bandages, bringing food, and eventually teaching Lenneth a few simple words. Cayenne spent every spare moment at her side. As he had predicted, his declaration caused division within the camp. Some were cautious but curious. Others were openly wary. Still, Cayenne made his stance unmistakable. Lenneth was under his protection. Anyone who threatened her would answer to him. "Some of them will never accept me," Lenneth said one evening as they sat outside the wickiup. "Some people fear anything that challenges what they know," Cayenne replied. "This is true everywhere, but others will judge you by how you live, not by who you were born. Give them time." In the weeks that followed, Lenneth met those willing to try. Saya, a young woman widowed by a clash with settlers, understood the need to escape a life chosen by others. Rauk, an older man with sharp humor, delighted in testing Lenneth's growing Apache vocabulary and laughed freely at her mistakes. Children followed her with curiosity, touching her hands, asking questions their parents could not always answer. It was not easy. Lenneth never forgot she was an outsider, someone whose people were destroying this way of life. She helped where she could, preparing food, learning basket weaving, tanning hides. She made mistakes. She offended without meaning to. But she learned. And through it all, her bond with Cayenne deepened. Away from isolation, she saw him fully, as a leader, a son, a man bearing impossible responsibility. She watched how his people trusted him, how he settled disputes fairly, how he labored to keep everyone fed, how he balanced tradition against the harsh reality of a changing world. Nearly 2 months after her flight from Garrick, Cayenne led Lenneth to a high overlook. The desert stretched endlessly below, bathed in gold and crimson as the sun sank low. "I have been thinking," Cayenne said, taking her hand, "about us, about what comes next." Lenneth's heart raced. "I want to marry you," he said simply. "In our way and in yours. I want you as my wife, my partner. I want a life that honors both our worlds." He turned to face her fully. "But I must speak plainly. This life will not be easy." His grip tightened, steady and sure. "My people are standing at the edge of hard days," Cayenne said quietly. "Each year the government presses us harder to abandon who we are. A time may come when we must choose, resist, or yield." "I know," Lenneth Ward replied softly. "And if you marry me," Cayenne continued, "the white world will not welcome you. Your father, your family, they will turn away. You will be spoken of as lost, ruined. There will be no road back." "I don't want to go back," Lenneth said without hesitation. "Everything that matters to me is here, with you." Cayenne lifted her face gently in his hands. "You are certain. Because once we take this step, we face all things together, the good and the hard, the simple and the unbearable." "I have never been more sure of anything," Lenneth said. "I love you, Cayenne. I choose you. I choose this life." Emotion brightened his eyes. "Then I will speak to my mother and the Red Mesa Council. We will hold a ceremony. You will become my wife." They kissed as the sun slipped behind the mountains, 2 lives from different worlds choosing to build something new between them. They both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but some bonds were worth the cost. Some loves were worth every risk. The wedding was held beneath a full moon 2 weeks later. It honored both traditions, Lenneth's past and Cayenne's people. Nael had softened towards Lenneth, helping her prepare, braiding her hair, and adorning her with beaded jewelry passed down through generations. Lenneth wore a dress she had sewn herself, white in the fashion of her upbringing, but decorated with patterned stitching Saya had taught her. Cayenne waited for her in ceremonial attire, steady and proud. The Ashwind kin gathered to witness the union. Not every face showed joy, but none raised protest. It was, Lenneth thought, all the acceptance she could hope for. The ceremony was solemn and beautiful. Prayers spoken in Apache, vows shared in both languages, gifts exchanged. Cayenne placed a finely crafted knife in Lenneth's hands, a promise to provide and protect. Lenneth gave him a blanket she had woven herself, a pledge of warmth, shelter, and home. When the final words were spoken, Cayenne leaned close and whispered, "Now you are truly free, free to be yourself, free to choose, free to love." "We are both free," Lenneth whispered back. The celebration lasted deep into the night. Food, dancing, stories by firelight, and cautious smiles from those who had once doubted. Lenneth laughed, truly laughed, surrounded by people who were slowly becoming her own. That night, in Cayenne's wickiup, now theirs, they consummated their marriage. It was gentle and fierce, shaped by months of trust, understanding, and shared hardship. Later, resting in Cayenne's arms, Lenneth marveled at the path that had carried her there. "Do you regret anything?" Cayenne asked softly. "Not a single thing," Lenneth replied. The months that followed brought exactly the trials they had expected. Pressure from territorial authorities increased. Encounters with the High Plains posse grew tense. Negotiations with army officers were fraught. Survival demanded constant effort. But they faced it together. Lenneth earned respect through action. She became known for her healing skills, combining what she learned from Nail with knowledge from her Boston upbringing. She taught some children English, knowing it might one day protect them. She worked beside the women, contributing to the band's endurance. Cayenne, in turn, learned from Lenneth's perspective. Her education and outsider's view sometimes revealed solutions he had never considered. They became true partners. Then spring returned, with news that tightened Lenneth's chest. Sylvan Marr, the lawyer in Santa Fe she had written months earlier, finally replied. Mercer Ward had searched for her, but the trail went cold after Santa Fe. Garrick Hale had never admitted finding her, too humiliated by his defeat. Legally, Lenneth existed in a gray space, not declared dead, effectively vanished. "I could claim my inheritance," Lenneth told Cayenne. "My mother left me money my father cannot touch. It's not vast, but it could help. We could buy land, somewhere on the edge of the territory, a place of peace." Cayenne studied her carefully. "Is this what you want? To step back into that world, even in part?" Lenneth considered deeply. "I think we must be practical. Your people's land is shrinking. If we could own land legally, create a bridge between worlds, it might give us choices." They brought the idea before the elders. Debate followed. Some saw surrender. Others saw survival. In the end, a cautious agreement formed. If Lenneth Ward and Cayenne wished to walk this path, they would do so with the band's blessing, though not with everyone's approval. The process stretched on for months. Lenneth Ward had to move carefully through legal channels, always mindful not to expose her location to her father. She worked closely with the sympathetic lawyer in Santa Fe, Sylvan Marr, patiently proving her identity and, at last, securing the inheritance her mother Elsbeth Ward had left behind. With that money, Lenneth and Cayenne purchased a small, isolated ranch in a remote stretch of land where Apache territory and settler claims blurred into uncertainty. It was modest, rougher even than her old mountain cabin, but it was legally theirs, protected under white man's law. More importantly, it sat in a place where members of the Ashwind kin could camp without being accused of trespassing under territorial statutes. It became a kind of refuge. Lenneth and Cayenne lived there permanently, but people from his band came and went freely. Slowly and cautiously, they also began forming relationships with nearby white ranchers, men and women willing to judge them as individuals rather than symbols of race or politics. Nothing about it was easy. They faced suspicion from both sides. There were close calls with hostile settlers and tense moments with wary Apache from other bands. But they endured, shaping something new out of two worlds that rarely touched without violence. 2 years after that first meeting in the mountain cabin, on a sharp autumn morning, Lenneth gave birth to a son. Nael attended the delivery, her steady hands guiding new life into the world, while Cayenne waited outside, barely able to contain his fear and hope. When Nael finally allowed him inside, Lenneth saw tears in his eyes. "A son," Cayenne whispered, cradling the child with reverent care. "He is perfect." They named him Oren, meaning willow tree, something that bends with the wind but does not break. It felt right for a child born between worlds. Oren's birth brought unexpected healing. Even those who had once doubted Lenneth softened when they saw the child. He belonged to the people, yet he was also undeniably hers. He carried possibility, proof that the future did not have to be defined only by division and loss. As Lenneth held her son and watched Cayenne's gentle devotion, she thought of the long road that had led her there. She had fled Boston as a frightened young woman, desperate to escape a life chosen for her by others. She had survived a winter alone, discovering strength she never knew she possessed. Then a storm had brought a wounded stranger to her door, and everything had changed. She remembered the fear of that night, the hesitation before opening the door. Choosing compassion over fear had altered the course of her life. It had led to friendship, then love, then partnership. It had led her here, to a home she had earned through patience, respect, and resolve. "What are you thinking?" Cayenne asked quietly, noticing her distant expression. "I'm thinking how grateful I am that I opened that door," Lenneth said softly. "Grateful for every choice that brought us here." Cayenne smiled, the warm, private smile he reserved only for her. "And I am grateful for the storm that drove me to your cabin, for your courage in helping a stranger, for your willingness to see beyond what you were taught." "We've built something remarkable," Lenneth said, looking around their small home. "Not perfect, but ours." "Perfect is impossible," Cayenne replied, "but this is real." As seasons turned into years, their ranch became known as a place where different worlds could meet without violence. It never became easy. Tensions between settlers and Apache only deepened with time. Still, they had carved out a fragile space where respect and understanding could exist. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Islin, meaning owl, and another son named Thane, meaning sparrowhawk. Each child grew up speaking both languages, moving comfortably between cultures, living proof of the bridge their parents had built. Lenneth never returned to Boston. She never reconciled with Mercer Ward. Garrick Hale eventually married someone else, and his family's influence ensured that Lenneth's story was rewritten. They said she had died in the wilderness, a tragic warning about foolish girls who fled security. Let them believe it. The woman she had been in Boston was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, freer, and more complete than she had ever imagined possible. On quiet evenings, after the children slept, Lenneth and Cayenne would sit together watching the sunset set the mountains ablaze. Those hard-won moments of peace reminded them why every struggle had been worth it. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened that door?" Lenneth asked one evening. "I would have died in the storm," Cayenne said simply, "and you would have lived safely, but alone." I'm glad I was brave enough to open it, Lenneth said. And I'm glad I was brave enough to knock, Cain replied, drawing her close. They had chosen each other across every barrier the world could raise. They had built a life that honored both their heritages while creating something entirely new. The future remained uncertain, as all futures do, but they would face it together, just as they had since that storm-soaked night when fear first gave way to possibility. Their children would carry that legacy forward. The knowledge that love can cross divides, that courage means choosing hope over fear, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open a door to the unknown and trust that what enters might change your life forever. Lenneth rested her head against Cain's shoulder and smiled. She had come west chasing freedom and found something far more valuable: belonging, not to a place or a people, but to herself, and to the one person who truly saw her. And she knew, without doubt, that it had been worth every risk she had ever taken. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.